It's impossible for a country as large as the United States in both size and population to not be divided in some ways. Over the past years, the country has indeed gotten more divided. We have reached a point where the entire nation hasn't been this divided in most of our lifetimes. Politics obviously sits at the center of this divide. Interestingly, a lot of professional sports leagues have worked their way into the mix as well. One of the biggest to center itself in the Great American Divide, the NFL. Plenty of Americans are divided for so many reasons, but can all share a passion for the game of football, and that leads us to the NFL. With the power of this league and all eyes on it from both sides of the aisle, the NFL played a role in deciding the 2020 election, whether it meant to or not. The virus. One thing that can be continually dividing the country is the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. There are plenty of different viewpoints on the virus. Different ends of the spectrum express it needs to be taken seriously or that it doesn't need to be taken that seriously at all. Plenty of people fall to different spots along that vast spectrum. But what football fans can all agree on was that they didn't want anything taking the NFL away from them. That includes the pandemic. Coming off the past few fantastic years of the NFL, people were very curious to see what 2020 was going to bring. Brilliance from Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson over recent years has people wanting to see more from them. And a playoff matchup that didn't get to happen last year is on everyone's wish list this year. Kyler Murray in his rookie year in Arizona didn't quite live up to the full potential, but with some tweaks and twists to the Cardinals roster and overall team strategy, his sophomore season was looking like it could deliver on a lot of promises made about this young talent. And how about the veteran quarterback movement in the offseason? Everyone wanted to see how Phillip Rivers fared with the Colts, Nick Foles and his new Chicago Bears, and don't forget about Tom Brady, leaving the Patriots after 2 decades of nothing but success to join the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in hopes to take over a tough division. These storylines and so many more were like teasers to a new season of a hot new drama on TV. Everyone has been waiting patiently for the return of the NFL and the potential of COVID-19 and the handling of it. Shutting down the NFL or affecting it in any way, oh boy, you don't want to see that wrath. Now, the NBA bubble was a success in terms of keeping COVID-19 away. There were no cases of coronavirus thanks to the strict protocol followed in the Orlando bubble. What that did prove was that a bubble could keep COVID-19 away. What it did not prove was that a bubble would be necessary to keep it away. Seeing that the bubbleless MLB couldn't keep COVID-19 away completely was a glimpse into what we could be in store for the NFL, not using a bubble. But the NFL powered on with their bubbleless plan. The NFL administered guidelines that it thought would be highly effective in limiting the virus. And for the first 3 weeks, it was. No cases of COVID-19 through 3 weeks. And then the first cases started to hit. The Tennessee Titans were the first to get hit, and they got hit hard. New England had struggles with positive cases. Even Las Vegas was affected. Games were getting delayed, pushed to all sorts of new dates. Things were getting a little hairy. Plenty of fans were of the feeling that the virus was being taken too seriously and that it wasn't that big of a problem, especially with so many people testing positive and being asymptomatic. There was a lot of anger that the games and schedules were being moved around due to the virus that was seen as being overblown. And of course, those fans felt like the left was the political side of things blowing it up. This would not sway these people to want to vote Democrat. Conversely, a lot of football fans looked to other countries that were hit by the virus, took on strict protocols, and all but eradicated it in a few months. New Zealand was a country that months ago was able to have their first professional rugby match with fans in full attendance, as the country hadn't had any new cases in weeks. These fans feel that the US should have applied similarly strict guidelines in order to limit the spread of COVID, and then the country would be in far better shape. The NFL might be able to have full attendance in all their stadiums, and there would be no issues of games getting rescheduled, delayed, or even canceled. These fans were of the opinion that the opposite side of the aisle was the cause of this. The right didn't take the virus serious enough. It continued to thrive in the US, and now it's affecting football. These fans wouldn't be voting Republican anytime soon. Of course, most people know how they're voting long before election season is upon us. But for the undecided voters in swing states that can make or break an election, once football season is upon us, you can really help them make a decision quickly if you mess with their precious NFL. Which brings us to the next point, the swing states. Think of some of the bigger swing states we have. Florida, which has the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Miami Dolphins, and Jacksonville Jaguars. Ohio has both the Cincinnati Bengals and the Cleveland Browns. Pennsylvania has 2 teams to boot, Philadelphia Eagles, and Pittsburgh Steelers. Even Colorado, often identified as a swing state, has the Denver Broncos. These are, of course, not the only swing states in the country, nor are they the only swing states with NFL's teams, but you can clearly see the NFL is very present in the heart of swing states. And the experts will tell you so often swing states can decide an election. Anything that can set a state to lean one direction or another should be accounted for. Did politicians account for what would happen with the NFL? Have they accounted for the anger of NFL fans, causing them to place blame on one political party and vote with that other? Due to the Tennessee Titans having that early outbreak with their team, their game against the Pittsburgh Steelers got pushed back. The people of Pittsburgh got affected by all of this, and their Steelers didn't even have any positive cases. The Steelers' midseason bye week got changed to being a week 3 bye. The bye week serves as a nice week off to rest and get healthy. Teams and fans of teams must prefer those bye weeks to be a lot closer to midseason, like week 9 or 10. Having a week 3 bye isn't nearly as helpful. So now the virus is messing with playoff chances of teams when it affects their schedules like that. The people of Pittsburgh couldn't be happy with that, considering Ben Roethlisberger was finally back and healthy and ready to bring his team back into the mix of the top AFC teams. Do you think that could have had an effect on the voting results in Pennsylvania? Swing State Colorado and its hardcore Denver Broncos fans got a game pushed back due to their upcoming matchup early in the season being against the New England Patriots team that had had multiple positive cases. No one wants their games to get pushed back, especially if the new date is one that's going to make it so that less fans can watch. And how did the people of Colorado view this from a political standpoint? How did they use their vote to say, you mess with my football, I want you out? And don't forget about the Tampa Bay Buccaneer fans. They haven't even sniffed the playoffs in roughly 13 years. That defense was getting stout and reliable, a real tough and tumble type of group that could get it done in many ways. And they had offensive weapons popping out of every nook and cranny. All they needed was a quarterback who wasn't a turnover machine like Jameis Winston. They got the exact opposite of that. Mr. Tom, my second home is at the Super Bowl, Brady. Not only had the Buccaneers' chances of making the playoffs vastly improved, their chances of making and even winning the championship in the Super Bowl became very real. And was the handling of this virus going to affect that Super Bowl run? Plenty of people in Florida would not take kindly to that notion. Not only do they not want games being canceled and rescheduled, but the idea that the season could get canceled not only is upsetting from a spectator point of view, but with Brady's age, that championship window may be a bit tight. Floridians don't want any seasons to be compromised. The way residents of swing states viewed the handling of the virus and the impact that had on their NFL teams was major, not something to be taken lightly. Social justice issues. And if all this wasn't enough for you, if everything going on with COVID-19 wasn't plenty, we also have the social justice issues of late. Front and center in the news of several months, just overshadowed by coronavirus, has been the call for many Americans to drastically alter our country's policing, amongst other things. The call for social justice. Not only have there been many stories that have been highlighted by Black Lives Matter and other groups, but the many stories have taken place in many locations. Locations with large NFL fan bases. Locations like Minnesota, Colorado, both swing states, Georgia, and more. It doesn't necessarily matter where these situations happen, the whole country knows about them. But the outrage you hear all across the country, it's even louder in those spots. And if you thought these issues wouldn't overlap with sports, you had another thing coming. Kneeling in football used to just be the thing you saw when a team was guaranteed to win. Victory formation, they call it. Now, it's one of the hottest topics in the nation. Whether or not players will kneel during the national anthem, whether or not players should kneel during the national anthem, is it respectful, is it not? Do the fans have a say in what other full-grown adults decide to do with their job? And what would the job say about their employees doing this? Fans were ready to boycott if the NFL allowed the players to do this. Fans were ready to boycott if the NFL forbid them. The NFL had to make one of those two choices. There was no third choice. Their decision was going to please one fan base and upset the other, no matter what. And what did the NFL do? They looked to their stars and the teams that they worked with. The wide receivers out there doing what they do, leaping in the air and making spectacular touchdown catches. The defensive linemen pushing past everyone to sack the quarterback and put the fans in a frenzy. They looked to the players and decided they would let them do what they want because they are in the business together and they viewed them as peers. And then the NFL took it a step further, allowing the Chiefs and the Texans to display a moment of unity before the opening game of the 2020 season. They put in racism in the end zones of the fields. The NFL sided with those calling for change and calling for action in respects to law enforcement. If people weren't sure which way they were going to vote before, they sure did now. Putting this in the face of everyone who watches the NFL, putting that front and center, it was a clear message. Fans cannot avoid that message whether they want to or not. And that message got an overwhelming reaction. Final thoughts. The NFL has power. It has a huge following, and every 4 years it lays smack dab in the middle of voting season. This year, that power and that influence resulted in a huge effect on the election. Thanks for watching this UpNext Sports video. Remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And leave us a comment if you think we left out any reasons the NFL swayed the election. And be sure to join us for the next sports video.